Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brigade Sports Podcast for February 24th, 2025. We got a jam-packed show for you today. Jack finally returns to talk about the Saints in the Bayou Breakdown. They got a new head coach, they got a new offensive coordinator, they have a new defensive coordinator. We're going to be covering all of that. Then we're going to do Miami Minute segment, talking about who else, Tyreek Hill, and the report that the Dolphins could actually trade him. This will probably be the last Tyreek Hill thing I do until there's like some major news. Also in that segment, Javon Holland feels like the Dolphins have moved on. We'll talk about it there. Then we'll round it out with a report on Matthew Stafford. Where do we think he's going to go? Is he going to stay with the Rams? The Rams have reportedly allowed him to seek a trade, so we'll get into that. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Everyone, welcome to the Bayou Breakdown. I feel like this is the first one of the year. I'm joined by Jack Tiernan. Jack, how you doing?
I think it is the first, Brian. I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I did a kind of Bayou Breakdown. I put it under the playlist when Kellen Moore first got hired, but I think this is much better because you're a Saints fan, a Saints expert. I'm just kind of giving like the base, news. This is what happened. So what are your thoughts on the hiring of Kellen Moore as your next head coach?
Given the candidacy, I think we're quick to forget the sort of turmoil that happened prior to hiring Kellen Moore, where we had a lot of people just opt out basically, or like say I'm not interested or whatever it is. Mike McCarthy being one of them. There are a couple others who names are escaping me, but at the same time, I'm not sad about Kellen Moore. I think he's been an above average offensive coordinator at the very least for the last three organizations he's been at, right? Looking at Dallas, looking at the Chargers, looking at Philadelphia, right? Yeah. So, now he's got a Super Bowl under his belt. He knows what it takes to win, right? I think people have their gripes with Nick Sirianni, but I think at the same time, like learning under somebody like that, learning under Brandon Staley, who obviously we'll touch on later, and even Mike McCarthy, right? Like those are people that he's able to jump in, take pieces from, and then now hopefully be able to kind of build his team around. So I think I'm excited about it. I think we have to give him some slack given the roster construction right now. Like it is going to be what it is for a while. Shout out Sean Payton. But like I think we're gonna we got to give him a chance. He's got to make do with what he's got. And I think depending on the staff that he builds around him, I think this could be at least a solid year where the NFC South is still pretty wide open.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a lot on the show. The salary cap's just not in a good place because they went all in, which I think they should have when Drew Brees was there. Like, I have no problem with that at all. I think we've kind of agreed. The problem we have is Sean Payton bailing afterwards. That was lame. Yeah. But it has put, Dennis Allen in a bad spot, and now Kellen Moore's coming into a bad spot. Granted, the salary cap has gone up, so that can only help. Any more room that can happen is good for the Saints. But I think the big first question that needs to be answered, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. Derek Carr, does he stay or do they get rid of him?
I think, the contract isn't great, but I think it's I think he's got 2 years left is the problem, right? So I think one is guaranteed, and then the year following might be a player option, which he's going to take. So I think for the sake of just you kind of have to roll with it, I think you have two options, in my opinion, and they are get rid of him and say, thanks for your service, go elsewhere, basically. Or we keep him on the roster as a very expensive backup, but at that point, you just cut him. And then we play with our rookie fifth-round pick, Spencer Rattler, who I think overall was fine last year, but if you build an offense around him, we might be able to see a little bit more. So I think, personally, if I had to pick one of those two, I'm saying get rid of Derek Carr. I'd rather see what we got in the new kid. He's more of an unknown, right? Derek Carr is kind of a known league average quarterback aside from that 1 year with the Raiders, basically. And then, my thoughts are let's roll with either rookies or very cheap veterans for the next couple of years and then try to get out of that salary cap hell, which is where we're at right now.
I agree. I think you got to see what Spencer Rattler can do. And I don't think anybody's expecting the Saints to compete this year. No. So let's say Spencer Rattler is a complete disaster. Okay. Well, now we know he's a complete disaster. We can go forward. So along with Kellen Moore coming over from the Eagles, he brought quarterbacks coach Doug, and I'm so sorry, Doug, Nussmeier. Hopefully that's how you pronounce your
Sounds
last
right.
name. So obviously he was the quarterback coach for the Eagles, Super Bowl champion now, get a little bit of a promotion coming in to be the offensive coordinator. I don't expect you to be an expert on Doug Nussmeier, but I just like vibing. How do you feel about that?
If anybody can make Kenny Pickett look good, then I think that no, I do think in reality, I think that's if nothing else, there's familiarity with Kellen Moore, right? Who is as an OC, the quarterback's coach is working closely with the OC. They're going to work closely together in this new capacity as well. So if nothing else, there's that familiarity. Again, it'll be very interesting and telling to see how Jalen Hurts and if for whatever reason he's hurt, Kenny Pickett or whoever the backup is there next year, how they perform without these two guys. But I think if nothing else, there's consistency and solidarity in kind of how they work together. So that should be good for maybe that's more of a justification for Spencer Rattler as well, right? Let's see what we can do with the new guy if we work together and kind of we know we work well. So if it ain't broke, right? I think, yeah, I like the familiarity. I like that sort of that type of hire. So I think that'll be rewarding, if nothing else, for a rookie to come in and hopefully perform well under.
Yeah, no, definitely agree there. And then the other big one, it just happened today at the time of recording. This will go up Monday, so a couple days late, old news, but this is more about the perspective. So the Saints are hiring ex-Chargers head coach Brandon Staley. He was the head coach for the Chargers 2 years ago when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator. A middling head coach, but a good defensive coordinator, I think. How do you feel about this move?
I like the move, honestly. And you mentioned it before we started recording is that Kellen Moore was under him, obviously, right? Like that dynamic might be a little strange. I assume not,
Definitely.
obviously. If he accepted the job, I think it's fine, right? But
yeah, right.
I think the biggest thing to think about again, same thing, familiarity, right? Like these guys have worked together before, and I like seeing that, not just like hiring their buddies. This doesn't feel necessarily like that type of hire. So I think it'll be good to see them work together. I think a good example of this would be like a Matt Patricia, right? Or like a who's the Patriots OC that they just brought back, and I can't think of his name ever.
Josh McDaniels.
I think this is a Josh McDaniels situation, right? Where he is a good OC, especially in the Patriots system, but as a head coach, he's terrible. And I'm not saying Brandon Staley's terrible, but I think it's sort of a little bit less explosive than that, sort of where you bring Brandon Staley back as a DC. His focus is on being a DC. I think he's going to be a solid addition. We have a lot of really solid independent pieces on defense too, if you look at it, right? Like, again, getting older, but Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, I don't know what we're going to do with Chase Young, but like people like that who are able to kind of plug and play. No Marshawn Lattimore anymore, unfortunately, but like our safeties and corners are okay now, not great without Lattimore. But I think for me, I'm happy with it. Again, you get a guy who was okay as a head coach, but ultimately good as a coordinator. He got a head coaching job for a reason at some point, right? So he was good at what he did. Let's put him back in that position, see how well he can do. Kind of for him, let's kind of recapture some of the value that he had as a DC, and hopefully make that just a better organization in general. This seems like consistency, right? These guys have worked together. We have them established early. Great. Let's go into the year kind of with a plan in action and roll with it. So I'm a fan of the hire for sure. Anytime we can get a former head coach in a coordinator position, I think is a win.
Definitely. So I guess like full on pretty happy with the hires going into this new era of Saints football.
I think so. I think, listen, anybody that's not Dennis Allen is a win. I would have liked to see a little bit more of a look into at least a public look into Darren Rizzi, because I thought he did a decent job with what he was given last year, and the guys really seem to like him, right? You have a lot of players out there advocating for him publicly, Kamara included. So like I'd like to see kind of like, I don't know really what went into that. Of course, no surprise, he went to Denver, so he's with Sean Payton now. But
of course, yeah,
no surprise to anybody. But I think for me, for what it's worth, I'm happy with it. I wish that we weren't. I think we would have gotten a lot more interest and better candidates. I'm not saying these are bad candidates, but like a little bit more interest in the head coaching position, and therefore a little bit more of like proof of concept if we weren't in such cap hell thanks to Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis also. Like,
yeah,
he's not blameless here. So I think it's sort of, I'm happy at the end of the day.
No, I totally agree. I think that's the one thing that held some people who maybe would have pursued this away, just because it's like in the NFL, if you like fuck up your first head coaching gig, it's kind of hard to get another one,
Right.
you go into like coordinator jail for a
Yeah.
while, and you have to like work your way back out of it. So
Brian Flores, right? Good
right,
example.
yeah, he's you know, and was he someone who interviewed with it or was like in
I think
contention for this?
I think we talked about it. I don't actually ever
Yeah,
think there
maybe
might have been a
someone people floated as like maybe Brian Flores could be.
yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, he'll get another head coaching job one day,
he
I'm
will.
sure. But
But that's the thing. Who knows when? It's been how long has he been not been an
yeah,
HC for? 4 years at this point. So
right. Yeah. So very interesting there. Well,
yeah.
anything else you wanted to add before we get on out of here?
No, I don't think so, man. I think it'll be an interesting season to say the least. It might be a bridge year, to be quite honest. Let's get out of some of these
Yeah.
salaries, but oh well.
Yeah, that'll be all right. You need those bridge years to, get to the other side and get
That's
everything
true.
better. So it'll be good. We'll be here breaking it all down. And of course, we have the at the buzzer segment with Jack and Ryan. We got the new Around the Diamond revamped segment where we're talking about baseball. And Jack, I'm sure you'll come on for some of those because we're going
For
to try
sure.
to tackle it as a team. So should be a lot of fun. Jack, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, Brian. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all in the next one. All right, moving on from the Saints, we're going to talk a little bit about the Dolphins in the Miami Minute. This is the Miami Minute where we cover my favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. So there's a report going around that disgruntled wide receiver Tyreek Hill could be traded. We've been over this. We've been back and forth. He's going to get traded. He's not going to get traded. Oh, maybe he is again. We've talked about how the Chargers could potentially be a good landing spot for them. I've seen people say like Buffalo. That would be insane for the Dolphins to trade him to Buffalo. I guess it's not impossible, but it'd be a very Buffalo Bills move in terms of like they're always trading with the Chiefs. So are the Dolphins like the Bills from that point of view? I guess we'll see. So the big thing is they need to find a team that's going to take half of his salary at least, if not all of it, right? Tyreek Hill has a major cap hit coming down the pipe this year. The rest of his contract's not too appealing if you believe that this past season was an aberration and is more of like a 31-year-old player slowing down, right? Which I think, if you want to argue that that's the case, I think it would be hard to argue against. Um, the bigger thing for me with Tyreek Hill is that he quit on the team at the end of the season. And then the biggest thing with him is he just doesn't really show up in these really big games for the Miami Dolphins. And that's frustrating because, you want a player like him who's as talented as him, who was voted number one player in the NFL the year, the last time they did that last year, to show up in some of these big games when he's dropping passes, he's pulling himself out of games. He's a non-factor in a lot of them. He's fumbling against his old team, the Chiefs, to allow them to run it back for a touchdown. It's been, you know, quite disappointing from that aspect. Obviously, he's been in other ways extremely impressive. So we'll see what happens there. Like I said in the intro, or if you're watching this is the last segment, its own segment. I think I am done talking about Tyreek Hill until something big happens. Until one, he does or says something big, or he actually gets traded, because this back and forth, well, I guess it's good from one sense of like people will view more videos on the topic. It's just like, okay, who cares what's going to happen? So speaking of another Dolphin player who might be on the move, Javon Holland, he is a free agent. He came into the league and played great. It seemed like he was going to be a star. He certainly played like he was a star in the making. And then last year on Black Friday, not this past Black Friday, but the Black Friday before, against the Jets, he has an interception and he sprains both of his knees, and he just has never really been the same since. So on his podcast, Breaking House Rules, he talked about how he feels like the Dolphins have moved on from him already. And this is from his podcast, quote, "Transparently, seeing the Dolphins post things like the Valentine's Day stuff or like any kind of edit and things like that, you can see guys that may or may not be there next year, or maybe somewhere else, are just not into it, are just not in it. I'm following them on Instagram, right? And I'm not in none of those expletives no more. I'm like, okay, they've kind of moved on. I get it. I understand the decision to do that because I would do the same thing if I was in that position. But from my perspective, I'm just watching it like, I get it, but like, okay, this is the effects of being a free agent. Your team, or what was your team, starts to phase you out in a way. So I think, it's unfortunate, but I do think that Javon Holland wants more money than the Dolphins are willing to give him, given the fact that he had such a lackluster season this last season. I think he could have gotten a huge contract if he returned to form this season, but just quite frankly, he didn't. So I think that makes the Dolphins hesitant. But, obviously, from his point of view, he wants to maximize his value. So I can't blame him for being like, no, I think I'm worth this much. I can't blame the Dolphins for disagreeing. So, what are your thoughts on both Tyreek Hill, potentially getting traded if they can find somebody to take on his salary, and on Javon Holland feeling like he's not going to be part of the Miami Dolphins going forward? Do you believe Javon Holland's going to be part of the Dolphins going forward? Or are you like me and kind of like convinced more or less that this era for the Dolphins is coming to a close? Unfortunate. He was a great player before the injury, but it is what it is. Football's a tough game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So I wrote a blog on wherecouldeverythingsports.com about where Matthew Stafford could play in 2025. It gave some possible destinations. So essentially, there's a report that the Rams have given Matthew Stafford permission to seek a trade. And that is where this completely like baseless speculation on my part goes out as I try to figure out who could potentially trade for Matthew Stafford. So I'm just going to read from that, and I hope you enjoy. Matthew Stafford era in Los Angeles may be coming to a close. NFL Network's Tom Pelissero is reporting that the Rams have given Stafford permission to seek a trade. Stafford joined the Rams in 2021 after a trade with the Detroit Lions that has proven fruitful for both sides. The Lions used the picks to help build a championship contending roster, and the Rams won the Super Bowl in Stafford's first year with his new squad. The Rams are likely looking to readjust their roster with an eye toward the future. Earlier this month, they informed Cooper Kupp that he'll be released, and now they're allowing Stafford to see if there are any suitors out there for him. That leaves the question, which teams could reasonably make a move for Stafford? Let's begin with my favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are in a win-now mode, having spent the past 5 years rebuilding their team into what on paper should be a contender. They recently gave Tua Tagovailoa a new contract, but the Rams did the same with Jared Goff before trading for Stafford. I want to really dig deep into the scenario, and I likely will for Dolphins talk, so be sure to check that side out this week. From service level, this move could make sense. General Manager Chris Greer and head coach Mike McDaniel could feel that they are both on the hot seat, and Tua going to the Rams would provide them with a possible future franchise quarterback. The team that I've seen most speculated about is the New York Giants. Admittedly, the speculation is fueled by Colin Cowherd's segment, where he suggests that the Giants make the move for Stafford using their third overall draft pick. Then the Rams would be free to sign Aaron Rodgers when he is officially released by the New York Jets. It's an intriguing possibility, but do the Giants feel like they're a quarterback away from contending, especially with the Eagles in their division? Does it make sense for the Giants to hold on to their draft assets and build for the future rather than trying to force themselves into competing right now? The team that pops out to me most as I mull over the Stafford move plays in the NFC North. And as much fun as it would be for Stafford to just get traded back to Lions and win a Super Bowl there before retiring, I just don't see that as a realistic possibility. Instead, I believe that in a vacuum, the Minnesota Vikings could be the best destination for their 37-year-old quarterback to have an opportunity to win another ring before riding off into the sunset. The Vikings were the second best team by record in the NFC this season and had their championship hopes dashed by way of terrible quarterback play in the playoffs. Sam Darnold played his worst football when it mattered most, and it led to a disappointing first-round exit after a 14-3 season. They have J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings, but in what would essentially be a rookie season, what can the team realistically expect from him? Bringing in a veteran mentor who has succeeded in the league, won titles, and fought through adversity could be the best thing for McCarthy long-term. I was initially hesitant to include Minnesota in this blog, or this video now, just because it would be bad form for Stafford to go to one of Detroit's rivals, but then I remembered how oddly vindictive the Lions fans have been toward their best quarterback in franchise history. Stafford returning and winning a Super Bowl during the Lions' first real championship window in decades would serve as a kind of just desserts. Ultimately, it would be a storyline worthy of professional wrestling, The more I think about it, the more I want it to come to fruition. So those are my thoughts on where Matthew Stafford could end up. If you liked it, please check out the wickedeverythingsports.com blog for more blogs there, and leave me a comment about where you think Matthew Stafford could end up should he actually find a trade partner for the Rams to trade. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Wicked Sports. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe. We got lots of sports videos coming out all the time on the channel. And of course, we have a main channel, Wicked Everything, where we cover nerd and pop culture news, those fake nerds, which is mostly video game and movies. And like those are like news updates, kind of similar to this, but a little bit more edited. And then we have Better Radio, where we have our podcasts that don't have to do with sports. Other than that, I really appreciate you checking out the show, and we'll see you in the next one.